Okay, so our four, I'm going to go in the order, well, I'll go from that side. I'll have to mess up my notes a little bit, but far across there is Mike Gauwitz. Dr. Michael Gauwitz, born and raised in the farm country of central Illinois. Began collecting both Hardy Boys and Nancy Drew books in the 5th grade, continued to build his collection, eventually expanding to other series such as Ken Holt, Rick Brandt, Judy Bolton, Dana Girls, and similar series. He stopped collecting new Nancy Drew and Hardy Boys books when the series switched from Grosset and Dunlap, as we've been hearing a lot about this weekend. Then he went on to college and then to med school, and during that time, for some reason, he thought he was too busy to continue collecting at that point. And once he finished, he became an oncologist. Started his practice in 1995. Soon after, he began to expand his collection with the goal of having a collection that consisted of first printings with dust jackets, even having first printings of any of the revised editions. His collection is best known to fellow collectors for him having acquired some of the original paintings, and that's been mentioned this weekend as well, used to create dust jackets for the series. In his collection, he currently has 8 Nappy paintings, which includes 6 Nancy Drew paintings, including Message in the Hollow Oak, which is currently on display down, I guess it's up one floor, but over in that corner, isn't it, that some of you probably saw last night or the night before. He also has 1 Polly Bollian cameo painting for Mystery at the Ski Jump, a Harry Kane painting for 3 Investigator series, 1 of the original paintings for Trixie Belden, The Mysterious Visitor. His most cherished paintings are 2 of the 4 known surviving Nancy Drew Russell Tandy paintings, Mystery of the Moss-Covered Mansion, and the painting currently here on loan, Secret of the Old Attic, which his note here says is his favorite Tandy painting. All right, so Mike Gauwitz. You know, and earlier this morning I was commenting about talented and educated, interesting, all those things. I was trying to say that we all are in different degrees in different ways. And one of the words I used was generous and giving. Maybe all of you have this, I don't know, but I think it's a wonderful thing to have something, whether it's a painting or anything else that you might have, a book, anything, that you share, that you're willing to give. Your generosity is, I can put this on loan to a museum, I can put this on loan to a library and share it with many others, not just lock it in my vault somewhere. So I think that is certainly an admirable trait. Next to, sorry, didn't mean to make you jump there. Next to Mike is Meredith Jaffe. So if you were to have a dental treatment in Meredith Jaffe's practice, you might be pleased to see the original cover art for The Enemy Match displayed on her wall. If she's showing a vintage car at a meet, an era-appropriate Nancy Drew book will be displayed along with it, eliciting many comments from the attendees. And in the Dawn Doll world, she has created her own versions of our favorite amateur detective. Collecting Nancy Drew books and related academia and memorabilia has been Meredith's passions ever since she read The Hidden Staircase in elementary school. With degrees, again talking about those educated people, degrees in nursing, dentistry, and library science. Dr. Jaffe has endeavored to weave her professional life with her avocations by sharing her knowledge and access to her materials with others. Using sleuthing skills in Nancy Drew style, Meredith extensively researched a particularly, there we go, intriguing prototype automobile. She proudly published her findings in a book last year, The Phantom Corsair, A Remarkable Journey. And it's available, it was available last night, if any of you saw that or picked it up. And it's also, if you missed it last night, on Amazon. Meredith resides with her husband, Dr. Richard Sloss, in East North Point, New York, and they have 2 sons, Brad and Jason. So there we go. Meredith Jaffe. And we all know Jen Fisher. I don't know what more I could add, except I would say one thing I had started to open with earlier, and I didn't, so I'll just say it now. Don't get scared, it's all okay. There's 3 reasons we're all here this weekend, and they're all women. One is Nancy Drew, one is Millie Benson, and one is Jen Fisher. That's right. So she's the reason we're all here. If it hadn't been for her, regardless of what the other 2 had done, none of us would be here today. So Jen Fisher, Millie's appointed president of Nancy Drew Sleuths.
And I'm 51 finally.
Wait, I did the math wrong. And the last but not least, Tony Carpentieri, a noted Hardy Boys expert. So if we have Hardy Boys questions of people in the room, we're going to get to hear a little bit about Hardy Boys as well. Collector and researcher, his Hardy and Hardy Investigations guides to figuring out what Hardy Boys printings you have, plus how to value it, have been popular among the collecting community for decades. He's currently working on a new guide. And and the next note I have says he also speaks fluent Tony.
Now you said it.
Yes, but you do.
So Tony Carpentieri. We'll let you 2 share that one, and you 2 share this one, unless we end up having to take one to the audience. All right. Okay, so I'm going to start out with the questions that have already been submitted, and I think these are to general, so however you guys, if you want to pass it around, I'm not going to call any specific person each, although the audience, you may choose to direct your question to a specific panel member if you like. So these are general. Number 1, the question is, what is it that you love about Nancy Drew and Hardy Boys that initially made you want to read the books?
Sure, yeah. I lived up in a small town in Jersey, and when I was about 6, we finally got a library, and there wasn't too much you could read then when you were sick. My library card, which I believe I still have somewhere, is number 18 from the town, and now they're up to like 5,000 or something. But they had a whole bunch of these like really interesting. I think the main thing was the covers. Like, ooh, wow, this must be exciting. I didn't know what Hardy Boys were, and I started reading them. I didn't read them in order. I didn't know the difference between, original text and revised text, any of that stuff. And there were some of those out there. Actually, I think my parents wanted me to shut up, so they'd give me a book and stick me in a room and say, "Here, deal with this," and that's how it started, and then all this other stuff happened. And to be honest with you guys, since this is a Nancy Drew thing, we had Tom Swift, Hardy Boys, and Nancy Drew. And after I got done with the Hardy Boys, I went through Tom Swift, and then I went, oh man, what am I going to do now? And I actually did read about 10 of the Nancy Drews. So
you started with the Hardy Boys, though, is that right, Tony?
Yeah.
Okay. They say don't judge a book by its cover, but the cover does make a difference in whether you pick it up to begin with to even start reading it, doesn't it?
Generally, I had school friends that read the books, and the librarian, had a bunch of them in the school library, and that's kind of what attracted me to start reading them.
This one? Okay. Yeah, I basically found Hidden Staircase in the 4th grade reading corner and got hooked, right away got hooked, and then started amassing them, which will answer a later question.
I'm like Tony. I started actually with Hardy Boys. I was 4th grade, so let's say I was 9, and I'm farm country, so this is in the early 70s. There's no cable TV. There's no internet. There's nothing. And what do you do when you live on a farm in those years? And so the library had Hardy Boy and Nancy. Of course, as a boy, I would only go for the Hardy Boys until I read them all. And then the librarian said, well, you could try these Nancy Drews. And I'm like, that's a girl book, And of course, then I actually ended up collecting both, and I really did like Nancy Drew. And to me, the thing that kind of changed me was, you know, so many of them are travel logs where you go to, Nancy goes to New Orleans or Scotland or whatever. And as a farm boy, you know, it kind of opens your eyes and lets your imagination feel like that could be me going there. I would love to go there. Someday I want to go see. When my aunt went to Mexico, I said, well, bring me back something Aztec, like from the Aztec warrior. And she looked at me like I was crazy. But I do think as soon as I started to read them, my grades went up immediately. And it's not because Hardy Boy Nancy Drew books are so fantastic, but just opening my brain and opening my mind, my grades just immediately, got so much better. So I'm very grateful that I feel like Hardy Boys and Nancy Drew got me where I am right now, to be honest.
And sure, go ahead. Yeah. Was your library card number 19?
Oh, hell, I can't remember yesterday, let alone 40 years ago, 50 years ago.
All right, next question, pretty straightforward. Do you have a favorite Nancy Drew or Hardy Boys book? And if so, which would it be? We can start back and come backwards with Mike. Yeah, put him on the spot.
I think my favorite Nancy Drew is Mystery of the Tolling Bell. And that's because, again, when I was first running out of Hardy Boy books, and my aunt said, well, I read these Tweed ones, and she gave me a Tweed, a Tolling Bell, and she's like, try it. And so I did try it. And I thought it was very exciting. It's actually one of the paintings, the nappy paintings I have now, so I love it even more because for that reason. But I thought that the Nancys were some of them were very exciting. So Tolling Bell is my favorite.
I really enjoyed Tapping Heels, and it was many years before I realized there were two texts of it. But I love Tapping Heels because of the cats and the Morse code and all like things that like. I would say that's my number one, and after that I would say Scarlet Slipper. But again, it's when it ties into something you enjoy, makes a big difference.
That's right. It does make a big difference. My favorite is toss-up between The Hidden Staircase and The Secret of the Old Attic, just because they're very suspenseful and those old Gothic suspense trappings like the spooky house, the secret passageways, the ghosts haunting the place and things like that. So that's always been a favorite.
Well, I'm going to go with Nancy because we had two girls, and they had absolutely no interest. Well, actually, they didn't really have any interest in Nancy Drew either. But when they were little, I would read them from the notebooks, and I think we read up to about number 40 or so. But to be honest with you, I remember any of them. So that's what I have to say about Nancy with this. It would be the notebooks, because that's the ones like that I remember reading, not that I remember what they were about. But the Hardy Boys, I think probably, and this is not going to be a popular choice, would be Masked Monkey, which is the first I ever got to buy myself, and which is still in my collection. I think I read it in the bathtub once or twice because it's all like and stuff. But I mean, it's not the best story, it's not the best anything, but I think that's the one that I'd go with on that.
And sometimes that's true. Is it for a favorite book? It's not necessarily the book itself, but it was the first one I got, or the first one I bought with my own money, or I read it in a certain place, which brings back good memories in itself. So good. So Tony, I'm going to let you start with this one then as well, but it's a two-part question, but we'll let you take the Hardy Boys part on it, please, sir. It says, what makes Nancy Drew so historic and relevant after 95 years in publication? Or the flip side, and how about the Hardy Boys at nearly 100 years in publication?
Unfortunately, I think they're going by the wayside. Like I said, we had two girls, and now we have two grandsons. And I would bring them to Barnes and Noble or whatever, and it's like, Alan, where's all the Hardy Boys stuff? It's like they have one copy of the Tower Treasure and one copy of the current book, and that's about it. Well, I did smuggle a couple in Christmas presents for that over the years, but anyway, yeah, I'm gonna pass to these guys because I think they'll have a different opinion on that. But as far as the Hardy Boys, it's just a precedent point.
You need to take over the Hardy Boys fandom and do what we do for Nancy Drew and start having all these. Now that you're retiring, I've got a job for you, Tony. I think the significance, just in a nutshell, of 95 years is no matter how wonderful the books were and the people that created them, which has been fabulous, is really the fans, because the fans keep Nancy alive and they pass them down through the generations and they kind of keep them going. And it's not as popular as it used to be. And that could change. You never know if someone gets a hold of the properties and does something a little more. But those classic books are still being reprinted and still being passed down. And those are really the core of Nancy Drew. So I really think the fans is a testament to the fans, the longevity.
Well, I actually feel there's a resurgence, and you may not see the books in the stores the same way, that I did growing up. But there's a new life that's breathed into them every few years. And this past year, we saw action figures coming out. We see, movies every few years. We see other collections being maintained and things donated to this collection. So it will be accessible for researchers and people who want to find out why it was significant in American publication. But I think a lot of that we're going to get to later. So to me, it's like keeping a certain memory alive, and also seeing how that connection to a past also inspires you to do what you do today. So one of the things that made her so meaningful is that she was a real go-getter, and she would have been a suffragette if she was ever defined as one. And we see where that has led to people culturally, and see also the fights that we have today. And I think that the tenacity and the character of Nancy Drew is something that is inspirational and carry us forward. So that's why I still think she's relevant today.
And I agree with that. I think, Tony actually brings up a good point that unfortunately the publishers who are in charge of Nancy Drew and the Hardy Boys right now, I feel like they need us to write their new books because, I don't want Nancy to, I don't expect Nancy to be perfect, but I don't want to think about her needing to go to the bathroom and this and that. Those things just don't appeal to me whatsoever. I know that makes her more human, but, that's still not necessarily the role model that I grew up with, so I have hope that there is, things will turn around and the newer volumes from Nancy Drew and hopefully the Hardy Boys will reboot, will be, more where we read it and we like it, that's really my hope. I think Nancy Drew has always been a great role model, whether it's for girls, whether it's for a gay man, I feel like she's strong. I feel she's confident. I feel like she's accepting of everyone. So maybe when you're a gay man or a gay little boy growing up and you have no role models and it's the early 70s and you read about a character and you're like, she would like me. She would be okay with me. That kind of meant a lot, to be honest, even though she's fictional, But I think that she was a great role model, and I give Millie all the credit for that, and Harriet as well, because I think that especially women deserved a really good role model like that, and I'm proud that Nancy Drew provided that. I really am.
Two of you at least, and maybe all of you, but at some point used the word hope in that, and I think we have hope because of a couple of things, but not only the points you made, in addition to something I said earlier, the multi-generational attendees that are here. And you think back to, hope comes from the fact that it's been around 95 years. I think that's probably longer than anybody in this room. I don't think, I don't know if anybody, my dad will be 93 next month, but that means Nancy Drew was, 2 years before that. So it's been here a long time, and it may decline, it may have its, waveforms, but the fact that it's still relevant, meaningful to so many after such a long period of time, I think inspires part of that hope as well. This next question is, I'll let you take it as you will. It seems very similar to me. So it says there are a lot of factors that have made Nancy Drew and the Hardy Boys such a mystery icon for so many years. And I think it involves the books, the movies, the TV shows, and all things. Which factor do you think is the most influential that has defined Nancy Drew and Hardy Boys' success for so many years? That's kind of an involved question, but I'm just reading what I have here. So an icon or something about the book, the shows, the idea of it that has kept it alive for so long.
Well, I think because so many people have been inspired by her, and so many people that are famous that consider her a big inspiration, it's helped make her a pop culture icon. So you hear her name everywhere. Mystery writers drop her name in their books. Somebody is accused of playing Nancy Drew that's extra Snoopy, things like that. And so she's just kind of made it into the popular culture. And that also kind of adds to the relevance and the longevity of Nancy Drew.
Yeah, I agree too. I agree it's the character and how it gave me kind of the guts to take on a lot of projects. With nobody saying that's never believing that something wasn't possible that I set out to do, and getting myself into all types of weird situations, like getting onto someone's property to take a photograph that I wrote, or calling up a famous actor to see if I can interview him about his father, or even calling Harriet Adams personally and meeting her. So these were the types of things that I feel these qualities that Nancy had, the guts and a little bit of curiosity and nosiness and a little snoopiness, kind of made things possible for me. I even when I went into admissions just to find out about dentistry, and I came in jeans and a ripped T-shirt and started talking my people's heads off, I didn't realize I was speaking to the dean of admissions. So I was kind of a little too laid back in my approach, but that's what kind of opened the doors. I kind of would sneak in as opposed to knock and wait for permission. That's my style, and that's Nancy's style. And also I like that she was approachable, and that she was very elegant and had a lot of finesse, but she also was a very humble person. So, she wasn't showy about herself. Yeah, okay.
If you like, and if you don't want to answer, that's okay. But if you want to chime in, go right ahead.
There's a lot more of serious work taken on Nancy and the Hardy Boys. I think with the Hardy Boys, it's just, hey, this is fun. Let's see how many times they can get knocked on the head. And as far as making the Hardy Boys keep going along, I think the TV show in the late '70s with Sean Parker was, my research in the Hardy Boys, which was like then $10 will get me a beer. I've done a lot of stuff about the number of books printed every year, number of books sold every year, and the Hardy Boys were sort of falling off in the mid '70s, and then we had this TV show on for 3 years, and there were more books sold in 1978 and 1979 than there were in the entire rest of the '70s and the '60s. So that would help. That one thing that helped, save the day.
I agree that, I felt like the Hardy Boys were more of an adventure series, and because there's two of them, not that it diluted anything, but there still wasn't that kind of central Nancy Drew character that was sticking up for the poor people, or, just Nancy was kind of a different character and a strong character. I do encourage, everybody always, a new book comes out, a new show comes out, and everybody says, that's not my Nancy, that's not my Nancy, I don't want to watch that, that's not the way. And of course, we're all going to remember her the way we want to. Just like, I was, again, the yellow matte era, so my Nancy always had red hair. And then my dad found Nancy, actually the painting I have here, that book, Old Attic, with a dust jacket. I'd never seen a book with a dust jacket, and Nancy's blonde. And I'm like, I didn't like what my dad was giving me. I'm like, this isn't the Nancy Drew I know. but eventually you're like, I love the old Nancy Drew. I love those books, you know? And so even like the Hardy Boys, the Hulu series, it had a little sci-fi in it, but at least it was the Hardy Boys. And I felt like I liked that, you know, and I felt like it was trying to reach out to a newer generation. And that's what we really want to, none of us want to see these characters fade away. And, you know, even the Nancy Drew, the new iteration that was on CW, yes, it kind of started off rocky, you know, you guys all know what I'm talking about, but at least it's the characters are out there and people will either like it or they won't, but at least they have the choice to watch it, you know, whereas I feel like, you know, the book series are kind of weakening, unfortunately.
You know, one thing I've noticed that has kept it, I think, as the word icon, and you both have talked about TV shows. When Lori and I are watching other TV shows, every so often, quite regularly, actually, you pick up references. You know, someone said, "Well, aren't you a regular Nancy Drew?" And of course, we have to stop and rewind it and say, "Well, I want to hear that part again. I want to hear that part again." You know, but the fact that so many are referring to Nancy Drew and not, you know, Perry Mason or Barney Fife or whatever else it might be, I think is a good commentary on the icon status that we have there. All right, so this next set is questions on collecting and on your own collections. So question 5 here. When did you start collecting Nancy Drew and Hardy Boys, and how many books and collectibles are there in your collection? Some of you will have to count more than 10 fingers, I'm sure.
Yeah, I got to take my socks off too. Well, where I grew up, all the kids would come over to my house because we're right next to all 12 years of school. And when I got to be in like 8th or 9th grade, I had to make sure in the morning that I went downstairs and hid all the books in the closet because it was, you know, a little embarrassing back then. But I sort of kept it up. Didn't really do anything through college and grad school and all that stuff. And then I met Mary and decided I was staying out on the West Coast, and we brought all the stuff out, and we had the books up there, and there were maybe 50 of them. And I don't know exactly what happened, but something happened, and all of a sudden I decided to start, you know, just collecting all of them, and got interested in them. Back then there were actually these things called bookstores, you know, used bookstores. You could walk in there and buy a book that you wanted, which was great, and I ended up getting a whole bunch of them. Then I met a bunch of folks down in L.A., Dave Farah and the gang, and it was like, wow, you know, I got one of each, and then all this other stuff happened, and I ended up with a large number of each. After a while, Mary threatened to smack me upside the head because we were running out of room in the house. But now I basically have just first printings of all the books, of all the Hardy Boys books, all 600, or I don't even know how many. It's not that great, because about 10 years ago, a fellow offered me a large pile of money for the dust jacket versions. And my interest is actually in the books. It's more of a technical interest, like plate, like for Hardy and Hardy, for the plate damage, and, you know, which came first, and this, that, and the other thing. And the dust jackets, wow, yeah, that's nice. But if somebody's going to pay me for them, then I don't have to worry about them. Mary doesn't have to worry about them when I keel over. Everybody's happy.
Well, on that note, when I was 10, so when I donated the collection here, I had over 5,000 items that came here, and I kept some at home. And then I've been trying to collect the almost 700 books that have been published just to have a home library. So at home, you know, then I had to get more library editions, and then I had to get the twin thrillers again because I love those. So I don't know, I probably have 600 or 700 at home, plus some things I kept for childhood. So I have a small collection now, but that's okay. I can come visit this one anytime. Got one.
Well, shortly after I read Hidden Staircase, I decided I wanted to keep reading Nancy Drew. Now, we have a library in my town. In fact, Long Island has many libraries. Long Island has about 100 libraries. Wow. It's a very dense island off of New York City. And it's, people, take a lot of pride in their town libraries. So my mother wasn't going to have me buy books. That was a lot of money. So I went to the library and I read basically every one that they had there. And then I found out that not all libraries carry Nancy Drew books. There's studies on whether they considered it good literature, not at the time. I actually used somebody else's library card until I was found out of another library card. That person got in trouble. But also my mother would get me books for 5 cents or 10 cents each at library sales, church sales, and garage sales. And I slowly amassed them. But by 6th grade, I decided I wanted to do a term paper on Nancy Drew. And I wanted to read every single title. And back then, it ended up at 50 titles. So you can do the math, figure out the year. So near the end of that, I wasn't going to be finding 10-cent books at garage sales. So I actually had to spend $1.61, on some of them near the end at John's Bargain Store. Well, anyway, I just kept amassing them, and my parents went away on a trip to England, and they came home with Missing Mac for me, my first Collins book, and some paperbacks, and that's what started. Oh my goodness, they're coming from other countries, and then I found a Nancy Drew game at a garage sale, and I'm like, okay, well this is nice, and I started amassing them. By 7th grade, by the end of 7th grade, I did a display, or 8th grade, sorry, I did a display at my school in one of the hallways in my junior high school, and I really became that Nancy Drew girl in junior high and high school, and people would give me some here and there. Then I went off to college, did a term paper for my English class, which was at Barnard, and I was terrified by all these Barnard women who really came in from private schools, knowing so much about literature, and I was doing a paper on Nancy Drew. But that's how I ended up meeting Harriet Adams for the first time, and incorporating my interview with her into my paper. Then, unfortunately, I went through what I call a dormant period. I went through the rest of my education, my years as an oncology nurse, and going to dental school and getting married and starting my family. And it wasn't until the 90s when a couple of things happened. One, all of a sudden I heard about a conference in Iowa on the news. I'm like, wow, there's other collectors or people that like the books. And then I also got a copy of the Nancy Drew scrapbook by Karen Plunkett Powell, who later became a friend of mine. And then I started going to South Jersey series collectors and met other people. Some people know, like Jim Lawrence, who was instrumental with getting the archives of this New York Public Library, that collection digitized. Well, I'm sorry, not digitized, but at least archived. And, other people in series books. Then I just kept collecting and collecting and collecting. And in the early those early days, there were many bookstores, and there was a lot of shoe leather. There were antiquarian book shows, book fairs, New Yorkers Book Country. It was much easier to start amassing them. And then eBay. I love the early days of eBay. So what my collection to date now, what I currently have is approximately 1,500 Nancy Drew books. Every title is represented with the different cover arts. So I have all the formats and all the cover arts that have to do, but not obviously every printing, and very few are first editions. But I also have from 30 different countries. I'm only missing from Thailand, Korea, and the Czech Republic right now. If anyone has them, please let me up. I have some original artwork, including one nappy. I have Scarlet Slipper, and then some others from the files, and some foreign ones, the ones that were done in Brazil, So I got very lucky about those. I also collected a lot of memorabilia, all the dolls, all the collectibles. I have a few things that may fill gaps in your collection here, but I think you also have a few things that fill in the gaps in my collection. I even have the film strips from the 70s, and I have Braille Nancy Drew books, and all types of stuff. And then what I also like, though, to collect is academia. And so books that have been written about Nancy Drew books, series books, pseudonyms, the Stratemeyer Syndicate. I collect those too. And that has allowed several collectors to come to my home to do some research. That included Melanie Rayhack, Deidre Johnson, and some other people have come over to visit. And then we also had a group come over once to go through different areas of my home and really get into the collection. So that's what I do. I have file cabinets of research and boxes and cartons, and I like to display and let people see the things. And I also do library displays on Long Island.
I was lucky in a lot of ways that, when I went off to college and med school, that my parents didn't put all my books in the, garage sale that they used to have every year and that sort of thing. So I was lucky that I maintained all my original books. But, again, as I got older and this was my hobby, that's what I went for the first printings with dust jackets. And actually my Hardy Boys collection is exactly the same as my Nancy Drew. So, I left for college in 1980. That's right when the books moved kind of from Grosset over to Simon and Schuster, and they were kind of more the paperback. And I just kind of felt like I'm too old to be reading collecting these new books. So my collection stops at 56 with Nancy Drew and 58 with the Hardy Boys. But I love Ken Holt. I love the Three Investigators. I love Rick Brent. I like Judy Bolton. I like Connie Blair. I like the Dana Girls. So my collection really is all of those series, And so, altogether, I probably have about 2,000 books. They all fit in one library. They're all displayed. I don't want anything in a box, to be honest. But I feel like it's kind of, my collection is finished. There's one book I'm still looking for. I'm not going to tell you guys what it is because then you guys will compete. But I'm missing one Nancy Drew book, and that's it. Okay, so she knows what it is. Don't tell anybody what it is. Unless you're looking to sell. What?
I was going to say, Mike, if you tell them, you might get about 30 copies of it in your mailbox next week. They may send it to you.
And I do appreciate that, so I'll think about offering that.
That's right. It's the pros and cons. So for sake of time, I'm going to kind of combine these next two or three so we have some time for audience questions as well. And Jen sort of touched on this in her presentation earlier this week. So it's... how important do you think it is to have a plan in place for what happens to your collection when you're no longer around, and have someone honor your wishes? And the second part of that is, what advice would you give to other collectors about collecting a large collection and thinking about a legacy?
So I have been thinking about that. I'm 62, but as an oncologist, I realize you never know, so we better be prepared. There's a couple things I'd like to say. So I did talk to my family, and my family is not interested. So when we look at my collection, the most valuable thing I have, the wonderful thing about my collection is really the artwork. It's unique, and I'm the luckiest person in the world to have these things. And so the question is, where do they go? What do I do with them? I showed them to my family. They appreciate my love of Hardy Boys and Nancy Drew, but they realize if they each got a piece of art, they aren't going to feel the way we all feel about it. And so they do want me to donate it somewhere where it will be appreciated. Part of the issue is that we say, oh, let's donate it to this library or that library. But that's just like when Stratemeyer Syndicate, when they donated all their things to the New York Public Library, They donated all their documents, several paintings, and all their books. And then it was up to some people in these groups who actually raised the money to have a library specialist come in to catalog all the documents. But I mean, all that got probably sent to New York Public Library in the mid 80s, early 90s. 90s. And the books still have not been cataloged. They don't have anybody who's offered the money to catalog all those books. So all those books, I assume, are sitting in a box or a shelf, hopefully somewhere where they're protected. But, so you have to be careful. If you just give it to the library, first of all, most libraries don't want our books. Let's just be honest. They aren't going to use them, or they're going to go in a sale. So if you want to donate, you kind of have to say, okay, if I donate, am I going to give them some money to kind of, put it in their collection, or just find another collector or someone who will really value it the way you value it. And so that's kind of with the artwork where I'm trying to figure out, okay, where's the best place for it to go? Just like you think, oh, let's give a candy to the Smithsonian. Well, the Smithsonian isn't even displaying Mildred's typewriter. So, I mean, what are they going to do with it? I mean, so it's hard to figure out the right place. But I do think it's a conversation you have to have, as I'm sure these guys will talk about. There's some collectors that they say, okay, Meredith, this is what I want to do with my collection, but it's not written in the will. And so then the executors and the people who are actually in the will, they don't hear what Meredith says that I told her. And so, boy, you have to have your ducks in a row. And my ducks are not in a row right now, but hopefully, within the next year, I'll get my act together and we'll figure that out.
Yeah, obviously, I've also faced a similar situation. One other thing that I like with my collection is I consider it a living collection. I'm not done because as new things come out, I try to get them as they come out in case they're not accessible or easily accessible later on for future people who might want them. So as the diaries come out, I get them. As the action figures come out, trying to keep track of what's going on in the Nancy Drew world, including foreign books. It is really important to have a little plan in place or a big plan in place. You don't want to kick these to the curb. You don't want some dealer to come to your family at a time of crisis and offering pennies on the dollar of what they're worth. Because there is not just an emotional value, but there is an intrinsic value to books that are in dust jacket, that are 80, 90 years old. And some of the memorabilia also 80, 90 years old. Well, some can be easily replaced, but things like the artwork that has such a significant value and are so rare to be found, these should not be kicked to the curb or donated, no matter what your intentions are, or to allow some new collector to find it in the wild. There's a big price to pay. Jen, Leigh, and I were contacted about 10 years ago. A collector of foreign books had died in Florida, and we were named in the will, theoretically, to receive her collection. Well, about a year later of wrangling and discussing this over, first of all, we didn't know what the conditions were in the home where they were left. We were worried about humidity and mildew. And then it turned out another will was found, which left everything to her cats. And we know that we know that most of those books ended up donated to libraries, weeded out or deassessed by libraries, and ended up with some people who flipped them on eBay. This was not that person's wishes. In other collecting venues that I'm involved in, such as Dawn Dolls.
The cat did it.
The cat did it, yes. There were several cats that did it. In the Dawn Doll collecting world, we have lost several collectors. And what we generally do in that area, since, it doesn't have the same value except for several dolls and several rare outfits, we tend to bring them to conventions or give them away to other collectors. We plan out who's going to get them, and there's a pipeline for those dolls and the outfits. In the car collecting world, there are Certainly for automobilia, there's a magazine which helps people put ads in of what they're seeking, or venues to move them down the pipe so they don't end up, you know, honestly in an antique mall and, you know, you're not sure who's going to find them there, but that they'll find a home, whether it's in an automobile library or to a museum that specializes in a particular car's mark. So those plans I definitely got, you know, underway as far as cars are concerned. As far as Nancy Drew is concerned, I've thought of the possibility about combining with the Stratemeyer Syndicate's collection at the New York Public Library, but they are not warm, fuzzy people like they are here. I would only do it if the items could be displayed and not just kept in the miles and miles of underground, although temperature-controlled conditions under the library. So it remains to be seen what would happen there. My children, my sons, are not interested, so I don't know if later on somebody might be. They're working on it. We'll see what happens in the future. But otherwise, I have librarian contacts with my, degree in library science. I have been networking with many, many librarians and archivists on Long Island. So that's always a possibility. And they might find a home one day. I'll probably make the decision in 5 more years when Nancy Drew turns 100. And maybe at that time we'll have other announcements.
Do you want to tackle the Hardy Boys side of that?
Actually, from my side, I think I had mentioned before that I sort of pared down my books. Larry would like me to pare down some more, but it's another story. But I know Mike was talking about the artwork. At one point, we had, I think, 111 pieces of Nancy Drew artwork. They weren't any of the rare ones like he has. They were all 80s and 90s. And about 10 years ago, one or maybe both of our daughters came up to us and said, what are you guys going to do with these? And so I think now we have 5 Nancy Drews left. Most of them we sold for pretty much in general what we paid for us. We lost 20 years of interest, but we got to look at something shiny for 20 years. And so it ended up working out. Mary insists that she's going to take one of them with her. So that one's going nowhere. And the thing is, I am mainly, and this is going to be blasphemy, but I am mainly a Tom Swift collector.
Did not know that.
Oh, yeah.
No. Wow.
And I've got two of the largest Tom Swift paintings that were ever done. And James Keelan's been trying to get them out of me for like decades.
I'm sure.
And I think maybe I'll take one of those with me, but at some point the other one needs to sell. So yeah, once we've gotten rid of a lot of the art that was, weighing heavily on the kids, and it was like, and like I said, we didn't really make much money on them, but they did sell for basically an order of magnitude more than the kids thought they were worth. I mean, they thought they were worth like $20-$30 each.
Oh my gosh.
So they were pretty shocked with that. Where it's like, good, thank you for not having me drop dead and having the kids put them out in the garage set.
Wow. And at least you have Mary, who, if she outlives you, she knows the value.
She knows what to do.
She can start to smack me over the head and come over. So there is that.
All right, Jen, did you have anything further?
Yeah, to wrap this up on that note, so I guess I come from the other side. I've crossed over from where these guys are at to where I found a home here in Toledo, and thank you so much to the library for that. I didn't intend to donate it when I was 10, but I still will collect for it. There's still some gaps of rare, scarcer items, or just suddenly something appears nobody ever knew existed, and you want to acquire it. But I've been able to be a part of the process. So my advice to you guys and everyone else and anybody watching this recording is, consider doing it while you're still here, because then you get to be a part of the process. You can help with decision making. You can, see it through to what you hopefully dreamed it would be or would like it to be. And it's much more rewarding that way. You don't have to worry about what's going to happen when I'm gone, because there's been too many instances, and just from the lawyerly side of things, where people's wishes are not always honored, unfortunately. There were some other collectors, and I won't name names, but when they passed, they wanted something to go to this person or something to go to these people, and the heir left just sold them to a dealer. They didn't care. And that's going to likely happen. I'm sorry. Just that's the reality of it. Or the people you leave it to that say, oh, yeah, I'll take care of it. I'll do something. I'll do what you want. They get so overwhelmed because they don't understand it and they don't get that connection with it. And they just get rid of it to get it out of their hair. Or they leave it to someone else that doesn't know what they're doing. And it's just, so if you really truly want to do something with your collection or rare, scarcer items you might have outside of the ordinary items and want those to go somewhere, you really ought to consider doing something now. Reach out to your libraries, to museums, see if there's any interest. Reach out to a place like Toledo here if you have something we don't have. Reach out to an archive if you have documents or historical items and focus on that. You can always reach out to me if you need advice. But yeah, it's been really rewarding to be a part of the process and get to see that through, and then get to experience all the fun of people coming to see it, like you guys here, and getting to enjoy it. And that's really rewarding. So consider that, even though it's so hard to part with these things, because, it's like a treasure to us. It's almost like Nancy's kind of like family, and all these things make us feel good, and we love our collections and they make us happy. And you worry, if I part with that, what am I going to do? I'm not going to have that anymore. Just start a secondary collection. But now I'm being asked, well, who's going to get your secondary collection? It's like, oh no, I've got to find another archive. Just kidding. But those are just things to think about.
I'll say a couple things if that's okay. So one of the things I think all of us have to do, whether we have really fancy things and, expensive things, or a normal collection, what I would consider a normal collection, that you have to kind of realize, okay, there's a sentimental value to me versus the value of trying to sell it if you decide to sell it. And those are two completely different things. Just like if you look on the Facebook pages and the lady says, my father just died, I have all this set of these beautiful Nancy Drew books, what should I do with them? And everybody has their own opinion. Bring them to the library, bring them to Goodwill, and, you're kind of like, oh my goodness. But you have to kind of realize a lot of my collection doesn't have much value. It's more sentimental. The picture covers don't have that much value, that sort of thing. And even if you look at the Farrahs, I think Tony's guide, honestly, is much more accurate money-wise in terms of values than David's, because, his guide is 12 years old or whatever. And I mean, the prices have dropped. So you can't look at a Ferris and say, oh my God, that's what this book is worth. Some of the really rare ones, okay, maybe it's still there, but most of the numbers are off. So I always like everybody to know what you think your book is worth. It probably isn't worth that, mine included, okay? But part of what I had to do with my collection is I had to get an appraisal. And to try to find somebody who is qualified to do your appraisal, I'm in St. Petersburg, Florida, the huge used bookstore. They wouldn't even come. I said, I will pay you. I have these first printings with dust jackets, hardboys. They didn't even, they're 5 miles from my house, would not even let me, So do not think that it's easy to even get an appraisal. Because when you really think about it, who actually knows those books best? Okay. It's like these 4 people right here, to be honest with you, in terms of value. I had Betsy Hoyt, from Books on Bay and Savannah, come down and said, Betsy, I'll pay you, the insurance company, because you're a bookseller, they will accept your valuation, but come down, because I didn't even know the insurance company wouldn't insure anything without an appraisal. I couldn't find anybody who's qualified to do the appraisal. Yeah. So you just, you do have to plan, and the appraisal may be helpful for some people. Really just depends on sentimental value versus what it's really worth if, you would try to sell it.
Okay, panelists, thank you very much. As promised, we will try to take just a few minutes. We're slightly over time, but we'll get questions from the audience, and when we finish that, we'll have just a couple of closing comments, and we have dinner tonight for those who are in the signed up for the weekend convention. So do we have anyone in the audience who would like to have a question for these guys?
Okay, beautiful presentation and all again. Thank you. My question is, I think it was like mentioned, and I think you all kind of touched on it, the dwindling of interest in our youth, and all the series you mentioned. Why do you, kind of two-part, anyone can touch on it. Why do you think that is? And what do you think we can do? Is there anything we can do to kind of rejuvenate or resuscitate that?
I'll go with the first part, and I think I mentioned this earlier. When I was growing up, you'd go into like Woolworths or whatever we had. Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay. Oh, I didn't even notice.
We go to Woolworths or whatever, and you'd have rows and rows of Stratemeyer books. And these days, you go in and there's all sorts of like fantasy and magic, and I guess that's the same thing. Pretty much everything, but Hardy Boys. And although I guess there are some other, I'm not real familiar, but there's some other detective series for the kids these days. But I mean, you know, how did these people outrun the Hardy Boys and Nancy Drew? I just don't understand.
Yeah, I think we could force choke those who don't like Nancy Drew, and just kidding. Yeah, you meet a lot of people that remember her or love them, but with the kids, it's kind of hit and miss. And I think it comes to the generational passing down. But even people who pass down, the kids don't always want them or want to read them. It's just such a preferential thing. And I think it has a lot to do when they're really young, getting them hooked on reading, but also making it fun for them. Sometimes maybe these older books don't look as cool as maybe some of the newer Nancy Drew books. The unfortunate thing is the newer Nancy Drew books aren't as well written as the originals, so there's that. If they could revitalize the brand and reintroduce a series that would combine parts of the classic with modern take, with really nice art, it might help. But I think also for years, librarians didn't want to carry these books in schools, and that also limited access for some kids to these books. Then it changed, and then you could get them in the libraries, but that probably didn't help over the years. I don't think there's any one thing you can necessarily do, but I think it would help if the publisher was more on top of branding and really into it. But the problem is it's not the Stratemeyer Syndicate anymore. It's not this family-owned company producing these. It's a corporate world where they have hundreds of other books and series and are just not focused. And I think they feel like they can just rely on the brand and the name and skate by rather than put a lot of effort into it. I think if they started looking at it a little differently and putting more effort into it, that would help. It might not really guarantee it will ever be like it was, but it wouldn't hurt.
I think one of the answers is more teachers like Erica Head.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And I think more libraries like this library. And libraries are facing cuts in funding. Speak up. Speak up before we lose this. Alana Nash also, who teaches at Bowling.
I think she's at the Kalamazoo somewhere up there.
In studies, when she had done a dissertation at Bowling Heights, I believe.
Haven't heard from her in a while.
She put on Facebook that a friend of hers was about to do a documentary on Nancy Drew and the significance in Americana, and she actually testified, you know, the relevance of this, and there were applications made, and the funding was granted, and it was just cut.
But Kathleen is going to be doing crowdfunding through Kickstarter, so we can all support that and get it, finish the funding. That'll be coming soon.
So that's what will keep the interest going.
Okay. Other questions from the audience, and when you ask, remember to be loud enough that they can hear you, but that also that everybody in the room could hear the question. Jolene, I think.
I just wondered what the process is of how you guys found the artwork. And how would someone go about that?
It's really varied. There's some people that just research and they contact the actual illustrator. That's the best way. And then see if they have anything available. Like for Rudy Nappy, it's all been bought up in private collections. There's one piece left in the family. There's nothing unless it comes for sale publicly. You can go to auction sites like Heritage Auctions and the one out of, what was it called? Up the Swan, and get signed up and put keywords in. So if any art comes up for sale under Nancy Drew or some of the artists, you'll get email alerts to it. But a lot of the classic art is in collecting hands now, or we don't know where it is. But the best thing to do is just keep track of eBay. Sometimes things get listed. And you can do Google searches to see if you find anything, but contact those, go in and sign up at those galleries that do art auctions a lot. And hopefully something will hit at some point. Unfortunately, a lot of it has been bought up other than modern art, which still is out there to a degree. You just have to kind of research the artist and then contact them.
Yeah, actually, one more thing on that. I do know where there's one, Hardy Boys. When I was probably 9, I was in Cub Scouts. And again, the town I grew up in, which I mentioned 2 or 3 times, I lived on Leonard Drive. Rudy Nappy lived on Charles Place. Then when I was probably 13, I was his paper boy for like 8 years. Wow. And I didn't know anything about this stuff. You know, I had the books and stuff. I was reading the books, but I didn't know. I mean, I should have just gone through his garbage cans every and see what I could have found. But Mary, actually, 30 years ago, Mary went. I think I dropped her off at the San Francisco Public Library one day, and I had her just sit in front of yellow pages from everywhere, and she would look up people. She would look up artists' names back to Menkel, who did MENCL, who did some Tom Swifts back in like 1910 or something. I don't know. And she kept finding people, and we're just, you know, back then you had to pay for each call, ran up the phone bill, humongous amounts. But once you found one, I think usually they knew others, and that's and most other stuff happened. And we ended up with those art, most of which sat in closets for 10 years until we finally got her out to get rid of it.
If I can just add something, I believe Tony Tallarico, he's either very elderly or he just passed. He was on Long Island, and some of his internal illustrations were being released, like, you know, recently, but you could not get them autographed. You know, there were little things like that. I remember I was very, very lucky. Rudy Nappy sold me one painting directly. And then I hounded a poor guy in Brazil for years to get me the artwork. We just decided that anything he sold me was going to be for X amount of dollars, whether it be a book or illustration. And I just had a standing order with them. And one day he hit the jackpot.
So tenacity and persistence.
As Drew would do.
Other questions from audience members? Oh, right here? Yes.
Would you ever consider pursuing again a real old-fashioned Nancy Drew movie? I think one time you tried to get with people to get a movie from the old-fashioned standpoint of Nancy Drew.
Oh, do you mean trying to get someone to produce a period piece? Oh.
You said that better.
Oh, no worries. A lot of the channels that do those, like the BBC, they typically go for British, not American. So that's kind of a thing. Hallmark Mystery Channel, a Cozy Nancy might be fun. They might consider doing something more retro. Maybe we'll wait till the Broadway musical comes out because it's going to be set in the 40s unless they change something. Very cute, very fun. And maybe that'll inspire a more retro trend in Nancy Drew. We can see if that crosses into Hollywood possibly.
You know, somebody that's Ted or Ned and not Ted.
Right. Right. I mean, I know we'd all love a period piece. I think it would be fun. Just the costumes they would come up with would be fabulous. Maybe we'll see it happen someday. I wish I was a filmmaker. I'd do it. But right there. Yeah.
Yeah, just speaking of Ted, He cross-dressed in both movies. And also, I was interested in that the lady who was here at Marcia when she said something about, I wonder if Nancy would ever go after Bess. And I thought that, I wonder if that would ever happen in my lifetime. Anything.
I don't think you watched the CW series. Yeah, check the CW series out.
Okay. Yep.
Or don't check it if you don't want it out. Up to you.
All right, any more questions or are we going to wrap up?
When's the Broadway?
We don't know yet. They're still working on it, and I haven't had any updates lately. Hopefully soon.
So I just want to, as we close, thank all of you for being here this weekend and for participating and making it a wonderful weekend. I also would be remiss if we did not thank the librarians, Nancy. Thank you for hosting us. Thank you for all the work that you have done to make it a successful weekend. I want to thank Jen for asking me to be moderator. It has been my honor and my pleasure. I thank you for hanging in there with me. I would say Monday, when we're all back home doing our own little thing, just be thankful for safe travels, be thankful for a fun weekend, and just note that, whoa, today is April 28th. So it was 95 years ago from Monday that the first 3 Nancy Drew books were published. So 95 years. So go out and celebrate. Thank you so much.